Sports Talk Chicago. We're Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's a fantasy football expert for NFL Network, a writer for NFL.com, and the host of the Sick Podcast. Please welcome Adam Rank to the program. Adam, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a great day for Chicago. Can I pull back the curtain and say when we're recording this, this is moments after the introductory press conference. So I got to be honest, I'm a little fired up right now.
What do you think of the press conference itself?
You know, I was a huge fan. I liked a lot of what they said. You know, I think anytime you hear a head coach, especially a first-time head coach being like, I'm not calling any of the plays, like, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. I think that was one of the biggest downfalls for Matt Nagy. I liked a lot of the stuff that he did. I really thought he was a good person, thought the players played hard for him. But I think that, you know, for somebody who hadn't had that much experience being a play caller, it was kind of weird for him to be like, I'm coming in and calling the plays no matter what. So I do like that Eberflus was like, you know what, I'm going to be the more of a CEO kind of guy. I loved Ryan Poles. I loved his message about taking back the North and never giving it back. I like that they brought in Justin Fields that showed like they're committed, like he's in, he's our guy. So there's a lot of positives. I know the meatballs will find things to be upset about. There's still people, you know, still worried. Why didn't we interview Jim Harbaugh? It's like, I don't know. Do you have $100 million laying around? It's an expensive mistake. You know, John Gruden did very well his first couple of runs in the NFL. And then, you know, that $100 million looks a little different now. So I'm kind of glad that they went with the route that they did. I'm committed to everybody that they've got going on. So I feel pretty good about it right now.
What was your reaction when you heard about the Bears hiring Matt Eberflus?
I kind of liked it. You know, when you were looking at some of the candidates that the final three that they had narrowed down, two of the guys who I really liked in this process, and we'll probably get an opportunity where we will get an opportunity to see how Brian Daboll does with the New York Giants. I thought he was a pretty interesting candidate just because Justin Fields checks a lot of the same boxes as Josh Allen. Brian Flores is another guy that I really like too, but he's probably going to get an opportunity, hopefully in Houston. If Houston can stay away from the McCown thing, which you know they want to do so badly, and just, I don't know, can McCown just be the offensive coordinator with Brian Flores? I don't know. I think that would be a nice little mix. So outside of those two players or two men who I really liked going into this process, of the final three, Caldwell, Dan Quinn, and Eberflus, I'm like, Eberflus makes the most sense to me. I like going with the first-time hire. I know it's a Bears tradition outside of John Fox. They've always gone with first-time hires, you know, and hasn't always worked out, but I think that's with a lot of franchises. Like there's a reason why there's a coaching cycle every year. So I thought it was worth it to give this guy an opportunity. And if Ryan Poles, the GM that they had identified is the guy that they wanted to bring in, if this was his guy, if he was able to usurp Bill Polian and the rest of the Chicago Bears brass and bring in Ryan Poles, then I believe in him. I believe in the guy that he wants to hire. So let's see how it goes. I'm ready to rock and roll.
How do you feel about the Bears going the defensive route for this job and not hiring an offensive-minded guy?
You know, I feel like too much was made of that. I think people get a little too, I don't know. It just seems like Twitter is such an amplifier of one bad take, just gets amplified. Like, yeah, why don't we do that? Usually, you know, that kind of conversation would be limited to some bar in Oswego with a bunch of guys swilling old style, and it doesn't go anywhere. But with Twitter, everybody gets subjected to this nonsense. Like, it's usually my uncle on the phone be like, God, they got to get the offensive guy. And you're like, yeah, like Matt Nagy, like Tressman, like this. There's either style doesn't work. We need the right guy. We need the motivator. And I think that as the press conference went on, as we started to hear what Eberflus was all about, we want that aggressive approach, but we also want to be smart about it. Too many times during Matt Nagy's era, we would have guys and we would have, you know, these situations where our guys were not playing smart. And so I think that this was important to get guy, somebody who's focused on playing hard, but also playing smart. And I think that would be a nice welcome change for us.
Adam Brank here on Sports Talk Chicago. Adam, what excites you about the roster that Eberflus is going to inherit?
I think obviously it starts with the quarterback, Justin Fields. This feels like the first time in forever. I mean, I like Jay Cutler, so let's not get it twisted. Let's not have revisionist history over that. But this feels like, a guy who's going to be leading this offense for quite some time. And I don't want to put him into the class of Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow immediately, but we should have similar type of excitement. And I think that there's reason for that. I like Darnell Mooney and Khalil Herbert offensively. David Montgomery, of course. There's some nice pieces on the defensive side of the ball. But what really is impressed me is I think that most people who follow the Chicago Bears are like, we need to make sure that our offensive line is intact and ready to go. And one of the things that helped the Chiefs get back to the AFC Championship game this season was the offensive line. And Ryan Poles was a huge factor in developing an offensive line that got them back to the AFC Championship game. I don't know what happened in the second half to the Chiefs, but at the same time, they got back there. And I think if the Bears can get back to the playoffs or stuff like that, we'll be in good shape.
How'd you evaluate Justin Fields' rookie season?
It's hard to really cast judgment on him with a coach that wasn't retained in an offensive system that hasn't worked in 4 years. It's not like this Bears offense was lighting it up for years and then they fell off the map. I think given the restraints of what he was given, he performed very well. I thought that any time that he was put into a 2-minute situation and was told to just go out and win a game. And I think of the touchdown run against the 49ers, which was a terrible play call that he turned into a touchdown. I think of the rally against the Pittsburgh Steelers, throwing the ball down the seam, being patient, finding Cole Kmet over and over again. Some of the dimes that he threw on some of the broken plays. I think there was a lot of positive. There's a lot of good things going on with him last season. We would have liked to have more evidence, kind of like, when the Chargers went into last year or this year, 2022. What year are we in? 2022. You knew that Justin Herbert was fine. And I always thought coming into this season, the one thing I wanted the most from the Bears was I want to know if our quarterback's good. Like I wanted a definitive answer like the Bengals had, like the Chargers had. And I don't think that we're quite there, but I think we're more adjacent to those guys than we are to somebody like Tua Tagovailoa, of like where they really don't know what they have in him. So I'm going to be cautiously optimistic moving forward. But again, going back to the fact that he was at the press conference on Monday tells me that the Bears are committed and we should be as well.
Are you concerned about the interceptions and the fumbles this past season, or is that just more so a rookie thing?
You know what? There's some things to clean up, and you want to know what is a correctable mistake? What is something that he can work on? Now, with Mitch Trubisky, and I don't want to bury Mitch for, it's not his fault, but the issues with him were like, is this guy ever going to learn how to read a defense? Is he ever going to know what was going on? What is he seeing or anything like that? Like, you can go back to that first game against Green Bay in 2018 when he missed a wide open, he missed the tight end, Zach Miller, who was wide open. You're like, oh my gosh, like if you can't see the field or if you can't throw to your left, that's an issue. But with proper coaching, learning how to hold the football, that kind of stuff can be corrected. I think back to like Tiki Barber, he had a fumbling problem until Tom Coughlin worked with him. And this is just one of those things. And I think what we'll see with Justin Fields throughout the entirety of his career is that he'll have a new wrinkle to his game every year. There will be something that he shows up to camp with that's new. Like, hey, this year, he's not fumbling anymore, or he's doing this, or he's making better reads, or whatever it is. He strikes me as the kind of guy who is always going to be working, always going to be improving. So I'm not happy with the interceptions and the turnovers. But I have enough faith in the person to work on correcting those mistakes.
Well, how much did Matt Nagy really hinder his development when you look back at last season and you look back at obviously Nagy not being asked back? He was fired.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways like you can get people harmed. You can get people like really ruin their confidence and things like that. I have not seen that with Justin Fields. I don't have any indication that that will be the case. I think that, when you read some of the stories, I think Justin, and I think he probably leaned on his college coach, Ryan Day, for this. I think that at some point, like this guy's not coming back. So don't worry about it. I thought it was great that he didn't play at the end of the season. Like, we want to see Justin Fields, but it's like, that's probably better that you're not. We get it. Like, that's okay. Like, why don't you just take the rest of the year off? Consider it sort of a red shirt situation. But I think we've seen some quarterbacks who've really had some struggles. And let's say, if you went back to, Tannehill had his struggles. Not a lot of people will remember this, but Troy Aikman, the broadcaster, was actually a pretty good NFL quarterback. And his first season in the league, he was 0-11, and he was getting killed behind the Cowboys offensive line. They drafted another guy, Steve Walsh, in the supplemental draft, who actually had the team's only win during his rookie season. And even during the Cowboys' first playoff run, and I hate to bring this up because it still bothers my dad. The Cowboys won their first playoff game with Jimmy Johnson with Steve Berline as quarterback. They beat us at home. Like really, the backup quarterbacks coming in, Chicago Bears weather. And this Cowboys team, whatever, got blown out by Detroit the following week. But, like Aikman still turned out to be pretty good. So I think there's still some optimism, and there shouldn't be. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think that when you look at people who are strong-minded, who know what they're doing, which I think Justin Fields does, like, I don't know. I felt like it would have taken a lot to ruin his confidence. I think he's ready to go. So I'm not too concerned about it.
Are you excited about Luke Getsy now working with him and calling the offense?
I am. You know what? I know that the joke will be like, well, the Packers passing game coordinator is actually Aaron Rodgers. So maybe they should have just hired him. And there is something to be said about like hiring these coaches that work with great offensive, with great quarterback. Like Adam Gase always comes to mind. Like, of course, like he worked with Cutler and Manning. Like, of course, he's going to look like a genius. But I think that there is something to be said about, how the Packers have improved over the last couple of years under Matt LaFleur and with Getz. And so I think that this is going to be a pretty good opportunity for him. I know he's been an offensive coordinator at other places on the college level, so he's called plays. It does strike me too. Like, I don't think that you can ever win with Bears fans because they're like, we're trying something new. We're bringing in a lot of guys who are out to prove themselves, high ceiling guys, and meatball media. It's going to be like, why didn't we bring in Harbaugh with, all these other old dudes? Like, I don't know. I want to take a step into the modern age of football. Like, I want to play modern football, which I think that Matt Nagy was an approach that it's unfortunate that it didn't work out, but I think that was more on the person than it was on the philosophy behind it. And I think if you're looking at the Bears process and what they're really trying to do, they brought in they got the GM that they wanted. They got the coach that the GM wanted. They're firing in on all the offensive and defensive assistants that they want. I think they're going about the process correctly. They're expanding the front office, and not to bury Ryan Pace, because I think that this is stuff that he wanted to do. I think Ryan Pace kind of career-wise died so the Bears could grow. And I think that, as much heat as the McCaskies get, the McCaskies want to win football games. Like, this is the daughter of George Halas, who hated the Packers. To think that this family does not want to win is foolish. And you know what? They're just trying to do the right thing. And I think that they're learning and they're growing. And with Ryan Pace and the coaches that they hired and Nagy and all that stuff, they started growing. And now they're taking it to another level. They didn't regress. They're progressing. They're going forward. They're like, okay, they understand the mistakes that they made with Ryan Pace. They kind of failed them in a way. Like, if they should have expanded it. They should have brought in an analytics department, an assistant GM, all this stuff. They understand those mistakes now and they're correcting it. So we should be happy with this. Now, are these all the perfect people in place? Who knows? And we might have to hire a new coach in a couple of years. But I think that organizationally, the Bears are in a better place than they've ever been in our lifetime. So let's embrace this. Let's be enthusiastic about it and understand that it might not be the overnight success that we saw with the Bengals this year, but I think we should still feel optimistic about it.
What impressed you when they hired Ryan Poles? Like, based on his resume's reputation within league circles, what got you excited about him?
I think coming from the Chiefs organization and the number of different people that he worked with, if you think of all the great Chiefs general managers that they've had, Dorsey, Pioli, and all these guys have won. You look at the way the Chiefs have drafted over the last number of years, like that's a winning organization. I don't think that you can go wrong pulling from a winning organization. And I think that when you look at the Chiefs and you look at where Eberflus is coming from with the Colts, it's very similar in structure to the Chicago Bears, like long legacy families who have won football games. Now, the thing with the Chiefs and the thing with the Colts is that they've gotten their quarterback correct. So it kind of makes everything work. Like that is the missing piece. But that's exactly what we want with the McCaskies. That's exactly like Jim Irsay is amazing. I love Jim Irsay. I think he's great on Twitter. I think he's a great personality. It works because the Colts win. Like they've got a winning culture. They've had a long history of success. The Chiefs are the same way. And even if you go back to the Lovie Smith era, it was very similar then. The McCaskies, like Virginia, it was awesome. Like we would, the Bears were in the playoffs. Virginia gets the Hallis Trophy, like that kind of stuff. Like it wasn't that long ago. Like they're smart people. Like I understand that they inherited this football team, but the McCaskies are smart people. And I think that they have now been put into place. And so I think that Ryan Poles comes from a very similar, like he's worked for a football family. Like he knows the dynamics. Like he knows that the Hunts are the Kansas City Chiefs. He walks in, he knows that the Hallis McCaskies are the Chicago Bears. The GSH is not going away. That's going to be permanent forever. He understands that. He worked for the AFC trophy is the Lamar Hunt trophy. Now he's coming to the NFC and working for the George Hallis trophy. He understands that dynamic. And I think that's one of the most impressive things to me. And I think this is why Bears fans should be thrilled with this.
Where do you see him going next year?
I want to get crazy. I want to get nuts. Now, a lot of this will be predicated on who is the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. I think let's elephant in the room. Like we can have our fun. We can go out and we can make fun of Aaron Rodgers for folding again in the playoffs, and we will. But at the same time, he's a very good quarterback who was very good in the regular season. So the biggest key is Aaron Rodgers coming back? Is Devontae Adams coming back? I honestly believe both are coming back. I think that Devontae Adams is going to get the franchise tag. Like you're not getting out of Green Bay. You're not getting 30 mil. They're going to franchise tag you for the next 2 years. And you should just get ready for that. Now, I hope that he has like a situation where he pouts and doesn't try as hard. I would love for that to happen. But he's a very good football player. And I think that Aaron Rodgers is smart enough to look at the landscape. And let's say you're Aaron Rodgers. Let's say you could force a trade. Let me ask you a question. Like, do you think that it's more obtainable to win the NFC North, given what's going on in this division? Or would you rather go play in the AFC West with the Chiefs, with the up and coming LA Chargers with Justin Herbert, with the Raiders, who just got Josh McDaniels? Like, I think I would stay. I'd be like, okay, I'll stay. Like, do you want to go play for the Steelers? You want to go contend with the Ravens and the Bengals and the Browns? Like the Browns are like the Steelers are probably the worst team in the AFC North right now. So for me, I think that both those guys come back. So I don't know if it's realistic to say that we would knock off the Packers because they've built a good team. They've got a good team, solid team. But I look at the rest of the NFC. I'm like, why does this team not win 9 games? Why do they not have a turnaround similar to what Nick Sirianni did in Philadelphia, where I'm not expecting the Bears to win the North next season, and I don't want to put this on them, but I'm like, they should make the playoffs. Like, honestly, with 7 teams, you should make the playoffs. I think you have a good enough roster. I think we have a good organization now, or I think the organization's gotten better, that you should expect to go to the playoffs. And if that's, I don't know, it's also a catch-22 of like, if they go to the playoffs, that's cool. But if they're like how the Chargers were this season, where you're like, oh, it's a good team. Like that's a good team. They didn't make the playoffs. Something fluky happened at the end of the year. Fine. But again, I think that I think they should have the expectations of the playoffs, but it's not like I'm going to fire the coach if it doesn't happen. Like if they're 3-14, maybe, but like, I think they'll be very competitive. And I think that playoffs are a realistic expectation.
Adam Brank still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Adam, a few more.
I like the way you said still. Like he's like, oh, he's still talking.
You're
like,
still
this guy
here.
won't shut up. He's still here.
A few more questions before we finish up. First off, the Sick Podcast. How'd you start it?
Oh my gosh. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. The Sick Podcast with Adam Rank. You can find that wherever you download podcasts. If you're somebody who likes to do YouTube, we do a live Q&A Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then we do the podcast on Thursdays. And I was working with this company. We were doing a football podcast. Ian Rappaport and I were contributors to Tony Marinaro's Sick Podcast. And they wanted to start another one, but they wanted it to focus in on the Chicago Bears. They wanted a very, like, instead of a broad football podcast, they wanted to focus in on one thing. And for me, working for the NFL, which I love doing NFL fantasy, love doing all that stuff, but I really love talking about the Chicago Bears. So we just thought it was going to be a good partnership. I kind of had another podcast going, but it was very difficult to get it up and running because I didn't have, I was producing it on my own. I was getting some help from a friend of mine who was great, but I can only ask a friend of mine to do pro bono work for so long before I'm like, I'm sorry, dude. Like I gotta do something. But this has been pretty cool. And we launched it in January, like right at the beginning of January. And so far we've been having some great success with it. We've seen a lot of growth, like the Bears. I think it helps that there's a lot of cool things happening with the Chicago Bears right now. But I think that the Bears fan base is robust. It's worldwide. And I think it's a slam dunk. So, and it's a passion project, as they like to say. So we're not making any money right now, but whatever. Like I'm just having fun talking about the Chicago Bears. And, it's been cool. We'll have to get you on at some point.
I'm down. I'm down right away.
We got to do a home and home. So I will. So it's cool. Well, it's cool because like I like going on all these, all these Bears shows. And now it's like I'm now having to be like, hey, can you come on? Can you come on? So expect the invitation very soon.
Oh, you got it. No problem at all. And last question before we finish up: your greatest moment playing baseball was what?
I think my greatest moment. This is always very difficult. I think from a game perspective wise. There was a baseball player who he went on to play. He went to Pasadena City College. He got drafted because I played against Darryl Kyle too. By the way, Darryl Kyle, this story isn't about Darryl Kyle, but Darryl Kyle went to my rival high school, could never solve me. And I had this weird, like I wasn't a great player, but I was good against good players for whatever reason. It makes no sense. So there was this guy for what organization did he end up going? But he ended up going to play in Pasadena City College, getting drafted out of junior college, going on. He was one of the best pitchers in our league. He wasn't Darryl, but he was also very good, like of that skill level. And he had this curveball that was impossible for a lot of people to hit that I always just smoked. And so before a game one day, he's like, you're not getting me on this. He's like, you're not getting me today. He's like, I'm not even going to throw you a curve. I'm like, all right, do what you got to do. And so we're sitting there and per usual, I have 2 strikes on me and he's just peppering me with fastballs and I keep fouling off. And then I was looking, I'm like, he's throwing the curve here. So he throws this curve and I hit this ball so hard. If I had the launch angle, it would have gone 500 feet, but it like almost drilled the wall, like on a line drive. And I'm standing on second base and he turns around and he gets the ball back. And before he addresses the next hitter, he comes off the mound, walks towards me at second base, mouths an expletive to me, and then goes back and pitches. Because I just gave him the Jordan shrug, like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I want to do. That was a dream of mine. I couldn't do that when I was trying out at Cal State Fullerton. I couldn't make that happen, but whatever. For that one moment, I was a stud. Just really proud of myself.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure to have you on. Best wishes with the Sick Podcast too, and hopefully there's some more good Bears news to come up for both of us in this content space. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you. The pleasure was all on this side of the microphone, and I look forward to having you on the Sick Podcast very soon.